Today on the Proposify Biz Chat, I'm talking to Dave Kirby about how to evaluate and sell your business and steps to take to protect yourself. Hey everyone, I'm here talking with Dave Kirby. He is the managing partner at Peak Technology Partners. Dave has 10 years of investment banking experience. He's been doing mergers and acquisitions. He's executed over $5 billion in transactions over his career. And we are here talking with him today about preparing your company for sale and how to protect yourself. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. Great to connect, and thanks for having me on the podcast. Excited to be here.
No, I think you've got a lot of cool stuff that you can share with people listening or watching this. So, one thing that's kind of interesting is that you're from Halifax originally, or you've lived in Halifax, but now you're in, is it San Francisco that you're living in now?
Actually living in Palo Alto, so just south of San Francisco. But yeah, grew up in Halifax, went to Dalhousie for my undergrad and King's College. Played basketball there, which was a lot of fun, and then did my MBA at Dal as well. Moved on to Toronto for a couple of years before going to New York, actually, for quite a while. My wife and kids and I lived in New York for about 7 years. I was working at Goldman Sachs there, so a big investment banking platform, and then moved out to Silicon Valley back in 2011. So I've been out here helping technology companies and really focused on helping entrepreneurs, so founder-led companies with either capital raising or selling their business when the time is right.
Very cool. I mean, I think people listening to this, a lot of them are entrepreneurs, a lot of them run businesses, a lot of times service businesses. Selling your business isn't something that I think a lot of people think about this early on. Maybe in the startup game, that sort of acquisition is on the mind a lot sooner. But if you're just operating your business, you're running your business, it's not something that that's always top of mind. So I thought it would be really interesting for you to kind of, you've been involved in all these mergers and acquisitions over your career. It would be good to kind of share with people some steps to take when you're thinking about selling your business and kind of some things to, like, how do you get a buyer? So I'll just kind of start with, okay, you've been running your business now 5-10 years, maybe more. You're thinking about moving on and selling it. Where do you start?
Yeah, great question. So I guess there's different scenarios, right? So there's the scenario of taking a proactive approach, and maybe, as you said, you've been running your business, it's mature, it's growing, you've got to a point where you want to sell it, so you can take a proactive approach. And there's also the flip side of you get approached by a buyer who has expressed interest. And so different situations, but common themes. So maybe I'll just kind of talk a little bit broadly about it. So essentially, if you know you want to sell your business, that's actually a perfect segue. I think one of the most important things is to think about why you're selling it. So you want to know your story and really have a good frame on why it is you're selling your business. Is it because, like I spoke about earlier, someone's approached you and you think that it's the right timing? Is it because you've gotten to a point where you've scaled up to a certain size and you feel like you're not the right person to take it to that next level? Is it because of maybe it's a health situation? Who knows? There's many different reasons, but there's definitely ways that you can set yourself up for success. So I think some of the most important things are being very organized in terms of having all of your information and things in order ahead of actually talking to buyers. Because what you want to do is you want to have a very organized approach. So when I think about that, I think about the types of things that either investors or buyers are going to want to look at. So things like your corporate documents, your historical financials, your organizational materials, your sales and marketing materials. So all of these things are items that are going to get asked for when you're talking to buyers or investors. And so you want to have those things ready, because when somebody expresses interest, you don't want to say, great. Now put them on ice for 2 to 3 weeks while you get everything ready. So having everything organized is definitely key.
And I remember when we were selling our agency, something that buyers always wanted was a balance sheet, and we used FreshBooks, which at the time didn't have like a balance sheet button. And so we had to go to our bookkeeper for one, and we actually had a really terrible bookkeeper that we used. So we just didn't have our shit together, and that was a huge sticking point. Is like everybody wanted a balance sheet, and it was always painful getting one. And it's so different now where we're at in our business, because we've got a good accountant, good bookkeepers. We always have an up-to-date balance sheet, and it just makes the world of difference.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So that's a good point. So on the financial side, I'd say the things that you want to absolutely have in order are the following. You want to have at least 3 years historical financials. A lot of buyers are going to want those broken down monthly. So if you can have it broken down monthly, that's even better.
Is that expenses or revenue, or what is that?
So typically you're going to want to have balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statement. Those are really the three that get asked for. From a pro forma approach to your forecast for the next couple of years, I'd say at a minimum have 2 years. All of these buyers are going to do their own modeling and quantitative analysis, but you want to be able to say, okay, here's what we think we're going to do in 2018. And if you put something out there, make sure that you can back it up. So you don't want to say, hey, you're going to grow 300% next year when you've traditionally grown 40% year over year, because you need to be able to back it up. So that's from the financial standpoint. I'd say, if you have audited financials, that's fantastic. But if they're reviewed by accountants, by an outside firm, that's typically fine.
What is the difference there between audited financials and just reviewed by a firm?
Yeah, audited is just more of an in-depth, formal approach that the accountants will take, and so it takes longer, and they do a formal audit is what it's called. A review is typically more of an informal review of your financials. They've looked at it, they've gone over it, but it doesn't have that sort of audit stamp. So that would be the difference there. I think, just digging back into the preparation, I think you could waste a lot of time talking to buyers that may not be a good fit. So I think you want to be thoughtful and strategic in who you actually have conversations with. So, for example, let's say you get approached by somebody that looks okay at a first glance. Well, what you want to do is you want to take a deeper look at, is there a rationale there for why they would want to buy you? Do they have the ability to pay? So you can typically, with a lot of companies, understand, certainly if they're public, what their cash situation is. Have they done acquisitions before? So you can get a good sense of if they're actually looking at you seriously or if they're just sort of fishing for information. So you got to be really careful with competitors and things like that. So you just want to take a thoughtful approch to who you actually speak with.
And I suppose you probably have them sign like NDAs, but I don't know, those are only so protective, right? Like,
yeah, you're right. So NDAs are good, but they're, to be honest, they're probably not worth much more than the paper they're written on. So I wouldn't share things with a competitor unless you're down to a stage where maybe they've actually put forth an offer, and so you can control what you share with them by maybe having a first phase of diligence where you open up the proverbial kimono so much. And then if they go down the path and they actually put forth an LOI, say a letter of intent, you might open up a second round of diligence, because, things that will come to light are things like customer contracts and your pricing. And so that's obviously, confidential information that you wouldn't want to share with a lot of people. So you have to be careful there for sure.
Yeah. Now, a question that I get asked a lot from people that run service businesses, like agencies, but I mean, it could be catering companies, whatever, any sort of professional, accountants, lawyers. Service businesses are so different from, I think, startups, where SaaS businesses especially have kind of a typical range in terms of multipliers and how you value them. But like agencies, it's almost like a black art. to valuations and why somebody would buy, because obviously agencies are, speaking from experience, more difficult to sell because, it's not as, it's not like turnkey business, so you can just take it and sort of run with it. So, I mean, I guess what kind of advice would you have, and have you been involved in any kind of mergers or acquisitions that involved service-based firms?
Yeah, it's a good question. So why don't we talk a little bit about valuation broadly, and then we can get into some specifics.
Sure.
So probably one of the most common things that entrepreneurs ask us here at Peak is, what's my company worth? And the honest answer is it's worth exactly what someone's willing to pay for it, and not a penny more, right? So, it sounds tongue in cheek, but it's the truth. So the things to think about, and the reason that we say it's, that's our answer, is when you think about lower middle market technology companies or tech-enabled service companies that we deal with, there's so much subjectivity in terms of valuation. And so things to think about that influence, and certainly ways that you can, drive up your valuation, are the following. So probably the most important thing that investors or buyers look for in terms of, a driver of valuation would be growth. So, if you've been growing, 10% a year for 5 years, that's great. That's a nice company. But if you've been growing 50% year on year over the past 5 years, that's a lot more attractive, right? So growth's big driver. Profitability is another lever that, obviously drives a lot of value. So somebody with, profitability margins that are 50% is obviously going to get, rewarded on the value side more than somebody who's at 10% margins. Ways that you can influence valuation, because there's so much subjectivity there, are to have competitive tension. So if you're out and thinking about selling your business, don't go down the path with one party, right? You should always figure out what the market looks like. Who's that universe of buyers or investors, depending on what type of a deal you're looking at. And how do you get more than one of them at the table and keep that sort of competitive tension and momentum? And the answer is stay organized, right? I mean, what we help do is drive a very organized and aggressive process. And that means, getting information out to everybody at the right time, having people meet with our clients, in a sort of clustered period, so that, you keep more than one person at the table, and you keep the leverage on the side of the entrepreneur. Because if you've got more than one person there, you can really play them off each other and help keep great deal terms and maximize on valuation. I
just want to say that is so huge for people, the idea of leverage, because once you lose leverage, you just lose the game. I remember, when we were selling our service business, we got to a point where we were so desperate to just get rid of the business that we were accepting awful terms from the buyers. The buyers were delaying. It was getting held up by lawyers for an extended period of time. They kept moving out the close date, and we were just so much at their mercy because we were struggling to keep cash in the business. We were struggling to keep people employed. It was a really bad time, and a lot of that came down to we were going down the path with one party, and we desperately needed to get rid of the business, and that's just basically crushed our leverage. So I think that you're bang on. People need to think about that.
Yeah, no, it's right, and the things that you can do to run more of a proactive approach than a reactive approach is to do things like be organized and have everything ready to go, and don't start talking to people until you've actually got those things in order. And so if somebody approaches you about acquisition and says, hey, we'd like to buy your business, that's great, but you also don't want to sign some exclusive document that puts you into a 90-day sort of period where you're only talking to them, because what happens there is you put everybody else on the sidelines. And so what we really try to do at Peak is we try to keep a non-exclusive process going for as long as possible. So, we'll even have deals where we've got multiple parties doing full diligence, deal docs, all the way down to the wire. And the reason you want to do that is the party that's looking at your business is likely looking at other businesses at the same time. We had a situation where we raised money for a company and we took two parties down to the final, basically 1 yard line, and it allowed us to keep all the leverage. We got fantastic terms at an unbelievable valuation, and it was a good thing that we actually kept too, because we closed the deal with one party. 3 weeks later, the other party closed with one of their closest competitors.
Wow.
And so, if we had gone exclusive with that other party, there's a good chance we could have been left at the altar, right? And so at that point, you've lost all your leverage. You go back to parties who've been sitting on the sideline, and you sort of, get your tail between your legs. So, no, you're exactly right.
Yeah. So, yeah, don't go steady with someone you're dating until you're sure they're not dating anyone else, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Is there any? So okay, you've got your shit together. You're talking to people. There's due diligence happening. And, I know one thing that often really is a problem with founders is that when they're in the state of either raising money or getting their company acquired, it's a lot longer a process than they're usually anticipating. And in the meantime, they're not growing their business. They're not working on their business. And so sometimes if a deal falls through and they end up not selling, they've got 6 months to a year where they really took their foot off the gas pedal, and their business suffers for it. Do you have any advice in those situations?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and something that we try to help entrepreneurs with quite frequently, actually. Part of the reason that you work with somebody like us, and I'm obviously not here trying to put a pitch together for Peak, but you sort of hit it on the head in terms of when you're in a process and you're trying to sell your business, there's nothing more important than you hitting your goals, executing on the business, and not being distracted. Now, the problem is that raising money or selling your company is like a full-time job. And so, whether or not you get an advisor to help you, you just have to know that going in, right? It's going to be a lot of hours in terms of preparation of materials and following up with parties and keeping organized and notes on everybody, because you want to make sure that you're doing it properly. The number one deal killer that we see is if an entrepreneur says, hey, we're going to hit, $10 million in revenue this year, and a process typically takes 4 to 6 months. And so, over those 4 to 6 months, if you keep missing your numbers because you haven't had your eye on the ball, well, your valuation just keeps getting knocked back. So you got to be really careful about that. I mean, what we try to do is limit distractions so you can focus on the business, because there's nothing more important than you hitting your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you said you didn't want to make it a sales pitch for Peak, but I think people should check you guys out, because it does help having a partner to kind of, at least in that early stage when there's sort of conversations and due diligence, just having somebody like you guys and at Peak kind of watching out for you and having those conversations and only sending you kind of qualified people that you think are good fits. I mean, it's hugely valuable as an entrepreneur, because then it frees people like me up to just focus on doing podcasts and working with my team and growing the business. So that's huge. Dave, I know you've got to run soon. People should check out peaktechnologypartners.com if you're thinking about getting your business acquired or raising a round of investment. Is there anywhere else online people should check you out?
No, that's perfect. Or LinkedIn. And what I would say is, and I appreciate the shout out there. Wasn't expecting that, so thank you. If people are thinking about selling their business or raising money, what we like to do, I mean, we want entrepreneurs to get a great outcome, and whether that's us helping them on a formal basis or just being an informal advisor, we really feel like what goes around comes around. And so we often are in situations where we're just giving people advice until it makes sense for us to get involved more formally. So, people have a lot of questions and may want to bounce ideas off. Give us a call, and we're happy to sync up over the phone or, connect if we're in your city or you guys are out here in the Valley. Love to connect and, help you with your business. So really appreciate your time, Kyle, and look forward to staying in touch.
Hope you guys like this episode. Love to hear your feedback. Email me at kyle@proposify.com and let me know topics that we should discuss in the future. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button and share it with your friends. Thanks, and bye for now.